Today, we are talking about how to become a better version of yourself. My guest today is Joel Gandara. He is a Cuban immigrant who arrived in the United States in 1980 at a young age with his family on a small, overcrowded boat, and he built a apparel business to 8 figures and beyond, starting with just buying and trading little items that he bought at garage sales. So I'll tell you more about him in a moment. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. And, if you've listened before, we've got great episodes in the archives with co-founders or CEOs or entrepreneurs. We got companies like Netflix and Kinko's and YPO, EO, Grubhub and Redfin and LendingTree. So check them out. We got some great episodes back there in the archives. And of course, this brought to you by Rise25, our company where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcast and content marketing. You can learn all about what we do at rise25.com. And I'm excited today for today's guest. His name is Joel Gandara. And first, quick shout out to our mutual friend, Cesar Quintero, who's one of the best EOS implementers out there. And he's just an amazing guy, a ball of energy. And you know him from South Florida as well. You Google his name, you'll be able to reach more about him. But I love giving him a shout out because he's such a great guy and he gives so much to so many other people. But my guest, of course, is Joel. He's the president of Joel Gandara Coaching, born in Cuba. He and his family immigrated to the United States in 1980 and had just an incredible story, incredible entrepreneurial spirit, never worked for another company, hardly a day in his life, and started buying and selling products in the schoolyard. We're going to hear some stories about that because I love these stories. And eventually ended up in the apparel business and built a business to 8 figures and beyond, and also became CEO of Morro Capital, an organization that was focused on investing in apparel brands. So we'll hear all about that. But Joel, I would love to start with your story of coming over here, and you have a visual for us, for those who are watching this on video. But you were about 5 years old, I believe it was 4.5 years old. And your family, first of all, let's start with in Cuba. You have memories of being in Cuba. And I've heard stories many times where parents don't say a word to their kids because they're worried about the kids telling someone else. And so oftentimes for kids, it's just like one day the parents are just like, we're getting on this boat. What was it like for you?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. My parents did not talk about it. They kept that quiet. They didn't want to focus on the fact that we had family outside of the country and that we were dying to get out. I didn't have that desire because I knew no better, but my parents did. So what happened, I remember one day I was supposed to go on a little boat ride in the Bay of Havana with my dad's aunt, who was our next door neighbor. And we were going to go there because it's like a shortcut across the bay for something. And I got a stomachache and I stayed home. And as we were about to leave, but I wasn't sure, military men in olive green came in, and they came in to take an inventory of our house. Because before they tell you that, yes, you're allowed to leave, we're going to go in and count all your forks, spoons, pants, underwear, everything to make sure that the day you do leave, it's all here or you're not leaving, right? The government owns everything. You own nothing. My parents didn't leave with wedding rings, with their glasses. All they left with was a shirt, pants, underwear, socks, and shoes. That's it. There's nothing else. Everything else. And by the way, when they say the government owns it, the state owns it, it's all corrupt. They all keep it. The guys on top keep everything. The person at the bottom gets nothing. So those are some early memories of like right before we left. But I have memories of playing outside in the yard, going to the store, going to my grandmother's house, going to the restaurant, things like that. So I have some basic memories, going to preschool. Now, we got here to the U.S., but the in between that, because that sounds easy. Oh, we got here to the U.S. Well, we spent 2 days at the port of Mariel, and this is not equipped for holding all of these people. We just sat on the grass for a couple of days. Food ran out, and we just waited. And then the military men,
Port of Mariel, where is that?
In Cuba, in Havana.
In Cuba, okay.
Right outside of Havana. And we lined up. I remember finally we're going to go to the boat. We line up on a dock, and the boat's right there. But between us and the boat's all these military people. And I remember them being mean. And I don't remember what they said, but I remember just mean. And everything was tense. And we're standing there looking at freedom on the other side of that ocean and on the other side of those military men dressed in green. And finally we got on the boats And we were on those boats for 12 hours between when they finally said we could go until we got there. There's no food, there's no water. We're just going for 12 hours in the heat of, that Strait of Florida. And 3 of those hours.
What is so the government knows you're leaving? What was the story? Was it like a vacation, or was it you're going temporarily, or what is it?
There's no vacation. There's no leaving a communist country like that. What happened is that in 1980, there was a Mariel boat lift. It was a mass exodus. The movie Scarface is 100% based on that. And with Al Pacino, it was a mass exodus. They allowed people to leave because some guys got smart. Thank God for these guys. They stole a van. By the way, stealing in a communist country is a good thing. You're stealing it from the dictatorship. You're not stealing from a hardworking person. They stole a van and they rammed it through the gates of the Peruvian embassy. And the moment that opened up, anybody walking on the street saw freedom, because an embassy is Peruvian land, right? That's not Cuban land. They have the right to it. So everybody, they flooded the gates. They opened the house, the doors, and every Cuban that could went in there, ran in there, and they couldn't control it. And so many people were going. Peru said, yes, we'll accept as many as we can handle. That Cuba said, you know what? We can't handle this. Whoever wants to leave, go ahead and leave. 125,000 people left in that summer of 1980. We left in May of 1980 at the beginning of it. And while we were on that boat, there was 3 hours of it that are imprinted in my brain forever, sadly. It's the boat would go up because there was a big storm, big waves, and we would see sky. And the moment that boat dropped, and it felt like a roller coaster, I looked around all the way. It was 4 walls of water. And then it would go back up. And that happened for 3 hours. And you heard screaming, my mom crying, hugging my brother and I the whole time, trying to tell me that we were at the beach and everything's fine. And I knew we weren't at the beach. I knew we were in the ocean. I recently was interviewed for a Telemundo television series on the 40th anniversary of this. And I was in my living room. They're interviewing my parents. I was behind the camera, behind the Emmy award-winning lady doing the interview, the whole crew. And I'm just there watching. And I hear my mom say that she was crying the whole time, asking God to forgive her for taking her children out to the ocean so they can all drown. And because that's the desperation. We all thought we were going to drown. I didn't know what drowning. I didn't know about death. But now I look back, we could have died very easy. A lot of those boats did sink during that boat lift, but we're here.
Yeah, man, what a scary experience. And it's not like it gets better, I imagine, when you get to the States, maybe better in the sense that there's some opportunity, but you end up in Key West, right? And then eventually South Florida. And then eventually you actually come to Hayward in the San Francisco Bay Area. So tell us how that trajectory, you had some family in the Bay Area, I believe.
Yeah, my grandparents got to leave in 1967, my dad's side, with all the kids. And my dad was the only one that wasn't allowed to leave because he was military age. Since he didn't side with the government, they sent him to 3 years of forced labor camp. And that's why he had to stay alone in the country. A few months later, he got sick and they let him go home. But by then he had no parents, no siblings, nothing. He was disconnected. He was alone. So 13 years later, he met up with his parents and his siblings, met a new sister. They just 12 years old. He never knew about. And so we got to California. But the stark contrast was those military men who were evil and mean. And then in a rough seas going out of there, I remember a beautiful memory of Key West coming into the bay there. There's a naval base there. And there's a cement dock that's very long. And we pulled up and it was on our left side. And there were women volunteers there with soups and Coca-Cola and just amazing. They had things for us and they were so nice. And a Black American soldier welcomed us and said, welcome to the United States. I mean, it's just what a difference. Even all those Marines on the base, on the naval base, they were nice. Nobody was mean to us. It was a stark contrast. We were there a couple of days in South Florida and Miami, and we went to be reunited with the family. That was my first time on an airplane. I remember that. And then it was rough because the difference now was we're in a completely different country. Had we gone from Cuba to Miami, the difference isn't that much. The food, the weather, the people, the music, everything's the same. We went to California. They had to buy me a jacket. I had to wear jeans instead of shorts. It was cold in Northern California. So those were some big differences.
And what was it like for you, like making friends and getting to know other kids? And were you in a community that had other Cubans, or did everyone look different from you?
The first time I met a Cuban was at a Kmart way later in life. It was a man that I heard him talking, and I went around the aisle and I ran back and told my parents, I saw a Cuban. And it was like 4 years after we came from Cuba. So no, I never met Cubans at all other than that. And then my parents got in touch with them. We became friends with them because it was so rare. And so Yeah, everything was very different. I didn't make friends right away. Obviously, I didn't speak the language. I don't know what happened the first 2 years. 3 months later, I was dropped into kindergarten. That was rough. I remember being in class, hating the teacher, hating the kids. I just
You didn't speak the language.
didn't speak it. I just thought they were all weird. Here, you come from somewhere where everyone understands you and you understand everyone. So all of a sudden, they're speaking gibberish. It was scary. It was frustrating. I remember one time being pulled aside. Maybe it was like an English second language teacher that would come and get me and sit me in, and there'll be a little partition and I'd sit back there. I've never even shared this with anybody. And I remember her talking through things with me. And I remember thinking, she thinks I'm stupid. I was a little kindergartner, but I remember thinking, I'm not stupid, but she thinks I'm stupid. I don't know how to prove otherwise because it's not working. The communication is not there.
Right. Yeah. If you have that communication barrier, it's hard for them to know that you have these capabilities. What did your parents end up doing? I mean, it must have been helpful that you had your grandparents on your father's side, but still, were they able to find jobs?
Yeah. So my dad was an electrician, like a technician in Cuba at an electrical shop, government run. You go there and get your radios fixed. So the initial thing is he started fixing radios and TVs. Back then, you would do those sort of things. Now they're so cheap, you just buy a new one. But when a TV costs you like a month's salary, you fix it. So, or more. So my dad would fix people's TVs. Finally, he got a job in Oakland, California at a not-for-profit religious radio station, Christian radio station. And it paid very, very little. I think in 1980, he was making $3-4 an hour. So we were always very poor. My mom went from being a physics teacher in Cuba to cleaning hotel rooms at the Sir Francis Drake Hotel, and but happy. My mom was they were both just so happy to be working and have any kind of job. And that's how they started. They eventually both worked at that radio station and worked there for about 20 years and made very little. It was a not-for-profit. I remember my dad would always tell me, if you could just go to school and become a school teacher, you're going to have it made. They make $30,000 a year back then. And he thought that was so much money.
You actually, you and I are around the same age. You got into buying and selling of garbage pail kids, which people of a certain age listening to this might have heard of them, but it was kind of like a baseball card inspired by Cabbage Patch Kids, which were really popular. Like today it would be like Pokemon are popular as far as cards go. How did you get into buying and selling those?
Luck and curiosity. On the weekends, we'd go to my grandmother's house in Alameda, California. And in the olden days, there were still some corner stores around. And we would go, all the cousins, like a mob, walk over. And this is in fourth grade. And we'd walk and get an ice cream or cookies or whatever. And I remember spending my little bit of money on a couple of packs of these trading cards because I thought they were funny. And I got them. I opened them up. I thought they were so cool. So on Monday morning, I took them to school. And in my city where I grew up in Hayward, California, we didn't have those there yet. Nobody knew about it because when I took them to school, everybody went nuts and they started offering me money for them. These kids all had money. I did not. Because my parents worked at a Christian radio station, they paid for the Christian school that I could go to. But all those other kids didn't get it for free or cheap. They paid. So they were wealthier families. You could tell they had nice shoes. I had Payless shoe store shoes, and I had pants that were hand-me-downs. But finally, I got to get on par with them and get some of their money by giving them something that they wanted. And so these cards, I don't know the math on it. Let's say they were 5 cents each. I was selling them for like 25 cents. And when I had a good one, 50 cents. And when I had the rare atom bomb or one of the ones people, Fat Matt, or the ones people really wanted, I'd get $1 for these. And to me, that represented the world because my parents had never given me $1. They weren't just handing me money. So in fourth grade, I bought my own Transformer. It was my first real toy other than because every time it was Christmas or birthdays, my parents would tell me to tell family, if they ask you what you want, say you don't want any toys, but if they want to give you clothes, you'll take that, right? It's what we needed. So I hardly had any toys. So I got to buy myself in fourth grade, Omega Supreme. It was the biggest Transformer base. And it was like $50. And I bought that myself with my own money. Wow. It was one of the most proud moments of my life.
What was your parents' reaction to that? Did they know that you'd saved up money? Were they supportive of it?
Yeah, they're not, they weren't bashing it or saying that was crazy or anything. They go, great, make money. We need to make money. I saw my parents hustle. My mom after work would make food and sell it to people in their church. My dad would, aside from having that full-time job, he would do electrical job if you needed to switch light switches or things like that. He would take plastic piggy banks that were like horses or a soccer ball or a baseball, and he'd drill a hole through them, put a rod, put wires in them, and create a lamp. and put a
Oh,
base
these
on it.
days you could make a killing on Etsy
on
doing
Etsy.
something like that.
I know. And
Yeah.
he did it out of his trunk. And, sell it for $10 or whatever, make a few bucks on each one. So I always saw my parents hustling like that. And I saw my uncle, who was a mailman, and he was more established. He got here in the 60s at 15 years old, and he was a mailman. And he would go to the flea markets and garage. He would buy stuff at garage sales, take it to the flea market. So I learned from seeing all them do that stuff.
Yeah. Now, I know you eventually get a job and you're earning $6 an hour, I believe it was, working at a shoe store. And you had a older colleague at that shoe store who needed to borrow some money. And so you ended up lending him some money at a profit. Now, I don't think I've ever met someone or interviewed someone on the show who had such a sophisticated lending operation. You eventually had about $40,000 that you loaned out, which is just insane. Take us through that, how that ended up happening.
It's funny how you just have to be prepared for opportunities. If I go to the corner store and I'm willing to not buy the gum or the candy or the whatever to buy these cards, it turned out lucky, but I had to have $1 or $2 or whatever that cost. I made a whole garage sale flea market business. And again, I had to have money in hand. And then in high school, I was a senior. I was 17 years old. And my friend Terrell, he was a former minor league baseball player. And we knew each other because we both worked after my school. He was a full-time guy there. We worked at this shoe store. And he had kids on the way, or a kid on the way with his wife. 24 years old, I was 17, and he knew that I was pretty smart with my money. And he said, by the way, not like my parents had money. We did not live in a good neighborhood, nothing like that. He just knew that I worked a lot and I made as much money as I could and I saved it. And at the time, I probably had $3,000 in the bank. And Terrell said, Joel, I need to borrow $500. You think you can help me? And I said, okay, how will you pay me? And he said to me, without me thinking that this could be a business, I was just trying to help out a friend. He said, I'll pay you $50 every paycheck until I've paid you $550. And I went, I'm going to make $50 in profit and I don't have to work compared to everything else I was doing, like working every day in high school. I was selling chocolates every day in high school. I made $30 a day profit from that. I went to work after school and now I could just give you my money, which is sitting in the bank doing nothing. And you're going to give me $50. We did it. And that day or the next day at school, I told my friend Armando, and I said, Armando, you're not going to believe what happened at work yesterday. My friend asked me for money. I'm going to take it to him tonight. And he's going to do this. And he's going to pay me $550. And that same friend said, would you do the same for me? And I go, you want to borrow? Okay, sure. And I lent him the money. And then he borrowed a couple of times later after he paid me back and he needed to borrow more. And then he told a few friends. I never approached anybody and I never set the terms ever. I always said, okay, what do you want to borrow? How will you pay me back? And what's the total? So people would pretty soon it started turning into, hey, I need $2,500. I'll pay you $3,000 over the next few months. Okay, sure. And quickly I was at 17 years old. By the time I was 19, 20, I'd have $40,000 on the street. I was working full-time plus. I was doing overtime and double time. I was working a lot and everything went to that and to just saving. And quickly, at 22 years old, I put $32,000 down and bought my first house and moved to Los Angeles, thanks to all that hustle, but also just saving all that money.
Yeah. How did you get into purchasing clothing samples and later selling them? Does that at some point in the trajectory you start doing this?
Yeah. So around 19 or 20 years old, I was in the Bay Area, San Francisco area, and I was going to garage sales and just looking for whatever I could. And I found a guy selling jockey underwear, brand new in the package. And this was in a nice neighborhood in Alameda, California. And it didn't make sense. You go to garage sales, it's a bunch of junk. This had jockey tablecloths, jockey flags blowing in the wind. And a guy looked good, like a professional salesman. And what is all this? And he says, I'm a sales rep. I'm independent. I work for Jockey, but I can do whatever I want with these. I buy the samples every 6 months. I go to Vegas. I do the trade shows. I sell to Macy's and all the big stores. I get my millions of dollars in orders. I submit them to Jockey. And then I'm stuck with these samples that I bought. He said, but I buy them real cheap, sell them here for $3. And look at them. They're worth 13, 14 each, brand new in the package. And I talk them down. I say, I'll buy a lot of them because I want to take it to the flea market. How low can you go? He goes to $1.50, cuts it in half. And then my hands were shaking. I was a kid. He was a grown man. And I said, I'd like to buy them all if you could go to $1. And he says, you know what, kid? I like your hustle. I like that you're going to take this and go to the flea market. I have a son about your age. He's inside right now and he's playing video games. And I've offered him all this stuff for free, always. Every time I go, hey, just come out here and do it. You get all the money. And he doesn't want to do it. So I like what you're doing. Yeah, I'll sell them to you for $1. Go hustle. And then every 6 months he'd call and say, Joel, I've got more samples. I got 2,000 samples. I got 2,500 samples. And I'd buy them for $1. Then I discovered eBay and I got rid of the flea markets. No more sitting outside for 8 hours in the sun. I started selling them on eBay and that grew. And then fast forward a lot of years, I started an underwear company.
It's amazing how many entrepreneurs in the last 20 years got started on eBay. And now I have a 13-year-old who's just made his first sale on eBay a couple of weeks ago. So it's exciting to see it continue, right? And eventually you imported an apparel brand from Mexico. How did that come about?
So here's what happened. I remember thinking, I've got a full-time job. I got a part-time job and I do eBay. And eBay would mean that I'd go to the post office at night or on the weekends or whenever I could go. And it was great. The numbers were phenomenal. It was very profitable, but within small gross numbers, right? Yeah. So I remember thinking, if I could just find another jockey sales rep, that would have been my solution. And then another one. And if I could get them all in the country. And I asked the guy all the time, can you get me in touch with other reps all around the country? And he didn't want to do that because he didn't know if he's in a gray area. So he never connected me. However, I said, I'm going to start searching on the internet. And I found a brand selling really well on eBay. And I tried to get the products and I couldn't. It was so hard. Finally found the distributor they had in Alabama. And he was very unprofessional. I spoke to him on the phone and I ordered $500 on the phone, $12 a piece. He sent them out to me. But these things were swimwear, underwear/swimwear. And they were selling for $40, $50 on eBay with the auction setting where they'd go up back then. And I bought $500 and he ships me the box. I get so excited. I open it and half the stuff are missing. And I call the guy and he goes, yeah, I didn't ship you everything. I go, okay, so fine. Will you send it later? And he says, no, I'm not going to send it. I screwed you over. I'm keeping your money.
Really?
Total idiot, because then I just did a chargeback on my credit card. They actually gave me all the $500 back and I kept the stuff. And I go, that's great. I got the stuff. But now what? This stuff sells. And I look through the tag and I go, made in Mexico. And there's a phone number. And I call that factory. Never made an international call in my life at that point. And I had to get operator assistance. That cost me $55 to make the phone call.
Younger kids need to understand that it used to cost more money to call longer distances. I actually had to explain the concept of long distance to one of my kids recently about how it cost more.
I didn't even think of that. You're right. And operator assistance, $55 for a short call. So I call this factory in Mexico. I speak in English and the guy says, I'm the owner of the brand and you are answering my prayer of 20 years where I've been waiting for someone that speaks English. He asked me, do you speak English? I go, yeah, I speak it fine. And he says, this is it. I wanted someone who speaks English and Spanish that's in this underwear world and I could connect with and sell to. I ordered $2,400 on the phone, sold it all out on eBay within a week at like 5, 6, 7 times markup. It went phenomenally well. I emailed him. I said, I've sold it. Let's keep doing this. Within a few years, I was buying over $1 million a year from him. His annual
selling
sales
it all on eBay or elsewhere?
No, then I started growing it because I started going to trade shows in Vegas and selling wholesale. He started, oh, by the way, that guy in Alabama could have made a killing off of me. He was selling to me for $12 and I was happy. That factory sold to me for $4. And so I grew a wholesale business around it, started going to Vegas.
It's so funny, boy, that lesson right there, what could have been a major setback, it could have been depressing. You could have been so angry about it. It ends up being this catapult to a much more profitable business for you.
Yeah, because it's either what, I'm going to give up and get in the corner and cry and stay living in poverty and poor, or I'm going to get out of this. Remember, I've always wanted to get out. I grew up knowing where I came from, so I wanted to get out of that and get into a more comfortable place. Now, you want to hear something that caused depression, legit depression? 9 years later, I'm buying over $1 million from this company in Mexico. The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki book, which I love. My dad was the poor dad. He still is. And this guy in Mexico, the owner of this factory and brand, was my rich dad. And I mean, I love the guy like my dad. And I learned so much from him. My dream was to one day when he's ready to retire, buy the brand from him, keep the factory in Mexico, keep the distribution going. I mean, that brand has a name, which is a person's name. Can't say it, but my friends would call me that name as if I was that person, because that's how I was part of that brand. I lived it, breathed it. It's all I could think about. Well, he came, we'd see each other in Las Vegas all the time, twice a year for trade shows, even with our wives one time. By then I was married. And one time he came and spent 10 days at my house with his wife, and it was beautiful. We just had the time of our lives. And he said to me, you're like a son to me. My son doesn't care for this business like you do. So you're it's a special. And man, I was on top of the world. And when he got back, he told his son about how well I was doing. And his son, shortly thereafter, right away, actually, asked me if he could use all my photography, which at that point, I'd spent over $100,000 on that photography, so he could sell. A little bit, just in his area, just a little bit. He's gonna, and within a week, I was told that I lost my just territory of Europe, where I was growing the business tremendously and making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in net profit and really growing it. So there was a depressing moment there when and then on top of that, he then started emailing my customers directly in the US saying, yeah, hey, we want to form a relationship with you. We know you buy from Joel, but hey, we want to talk to you. And that was a moment of absolute depression. I spent about 24 hours knocked out in bed. I couldn't function. I couldn't move. I thought it was over. And I realized something. I had a fake business. I did not own the brands or the products. I owned the products because I'd buy them and I'd store them in my warehouse, and I had employees and I had all that.
You're
but
totally
I didn't
dependent
own the brand
on this one channel, this one supplier. Yeah.
And then I didn't own the customer's data. I was wholesaling. So I was this middleman that I could just be removed. They could talk. Fortunately, I built really good relationships over the years with the stores. And in one day, I got bombarded with emails. And it was all my customers forwarding me the email directly from the son saying, hey, this is unethical. He's trying to contact us directly. We want to respect you. And so it showed me that at least I had that faith, that loyalty from my clients. But man, I went into a short-term depression. I'd say about 24 hours where I got sick and sad.
That is awful. And did you ever have a conversation with the rich dad, the owner of the factory, about it?
Back and forth. And they just would deny and say, no, you believe it or not. He said, you had a conversation with my son on the phone and you gave him that territory of Europe. And I said, why would I do that? I am netting hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I just started a year ago with Europe. Why would I give it away? I don't know, but that's what you told them. So, they tried to just.
So then what did you do next?
So next, after that depression, I had a mentor who got me out of it quickly within a day. He said, look, Joel, yes, you were backstabbed. Yes, that sucks. But you've built that relationship with those store buyers, haven't you? And you're the one who goes and flies out to see them. And you're the one writing them handwritten cards and sending them Starbucks cards and building the relationship and under promising and over delivering. You're the one doing that, right? And he built me up a little. I go, yeah, I do that. And he goes, go start your own brand. Nobody's ever going to take it away from you. And you're going to make way more money. And I go, I don't know if I could do that. All those limiting beliefs. And I worked myself up over a few months. I got a brand. I developed it. In fact, my clients helped me develop it. I told them what was going on. And I said, I just need to know what you would like me to make you. And they said, make us some of the stuff that the Mexican company does. Obviously, it's not illegal. You just change the name. It's not, I can make this.
Yeah, developing a new brand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely. And we copied some ideas, but then we developed a whole bunch of new stuff, literally with my customers giving me samples. They would send me samples and say, we used to buy this from this company, but they don't make it anymore, or they're too expensive. They don't deliver on time, or their quality is bad. Can you make us this? And I put it all together and I made a collection. I spent $80,000. I was very nervous because here it might all get taken away tomorrow. I spent $80,000. I had 2 little kids at the time. Now we have 4, but back then we had 2 little kids. And who would have thought it worked? Within 13 months, we did over $1 million on that and went to the next brand, kept developing brands. And then I started buying my competitors. And my whole, my customers, and who were buying wholesale from me, and even some of my vendors. I bought 14 businesses in that industry over a few years.
And that, so did it eventually evolve to become Morro Capital, or is that like a separate business? How do you draw the line?
Yeah, so I had a company. It was an underwear company, and every time I'd email anyone, they go, "You own an underwear company?" It was very distracting, and I wanted to talk about a T-shirt company. I wanted to buy this company that sold jeans, and everybody's, "But you're an underwear company." I go, "You know what? Forget it. I'll form a capital company. It's all my money." And the name is a castle in Cuba that the Spanish built 500 years ago. It's called the Morro Castle. It's in the Bay of Havana. It's a beautiful brick, gray brick structure. And so it's called Morro Capital. And that's what the logo of it is. And it's just intended to buy businesses and get away from the underwear world that I thought it was just kindergarten. The people laugh. Apparently they still laugh when you say the word underwear. See, there's proof.
So from this, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but I felt like you gave me permission. I can think of a couple lessons, but I don't want to provide them. I want you to provide them. So what are, reflecting back on that, really dark period in your life, what are a few takeaways or lessons that you take from that experience, or ways in which you would do things differently if you could?
Yeah. Early on, when I started having some success with that brand in Mexico, I told him, because I said, I could do some amazing things because I'm finding what competitors are doing. I'm watching them on eBay. I see them start their auctions at $9.99 and they're finishing at $40, $50. There's a huge demand for this subsection of special underwear, special swimsuits, special shorts. And I made the mistake of going to that factory in Mexico and saying, hey, can you make me a brand, my own brand? This is early on, very early on. And they said, no, we don't do that. But what ideas do you have? We'll make them for you under our brand. You know, it was early on. And I brought them, I went and spent all this money buying all these samples. And I knew they were going to crush it because I knew the customer. I'm not very smart, but I'm very observant. And I saw what people like. I was answering all the customer service emails. I was doing everything in the beginning, everything, packing every order.
So you knew about styles, you knew about, trends in the apparel business, that sort of thing.
I knew enough.
Yeah.
Enough. And so I remember sending them those samples and they made the collections and we absolutely crushed it. I mean, crushed it. Like, a huge percentage of the business now became my new designs. And I'm not a designer, but I could see what's out there and I could say that seems to be selling. Let's try it out. Well, it transformed their business, not just here in the US, but all over, wherever they had customers in Latin America, those were their best sellers. That's a mistake I made because I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the coaching. I never had a coach at that point. I didn't have even a mentor at that point early on where I could say, hey, I got this opportunity. I just went ahead and did what my rich dad said. And there I lost out. But you know what? I made a portion of that because I did buy at a low price. I wholesaled and retailed it and got to make all that money. But I'll tell you this, but on a good side, another lesson was to not feel sorry for myself. Bad things are going to happen. They will happen. That's fine. Don't get caught up in the moment, step back, detach from that moment and say, okay, I'm here. I need to get here. So I just got lowered a little bit. I could still get there. Let me work toward it. But I think we get into a cycle of feeling sorry for ourselves. It knocks us down. And then any opportunity that gets presented, we knock it down. We have a good little angel on one side telling us positive things, and we have a little devil on the other shoulder saying the negative things. And I let myself sometimes get in that rut of letting that negative voice talk to me. I've learned a lot about that through a lot of ups and downs. We've mentioned a little bit here, but yeah, it's all been learning. You either earn money or you learn the lesson. And I've learned a lot of lessons.
I mean, even that, first initial purchase where the guy ended up screwing you over and you had to charge back your credit card, which led to a whole, realm of opportunities. That was a big setback, which led to great opportunities for you. And not that we're focused on this, but oftentimes you hear the son takes over the business and has no experience and then it collapses later. Do you know what happened to that son after?
I've talked to I've talked to a distributor or two after who's, I don't know if they were their main distributor, just someone who sold them. They said that the sales went down. When I brought out my brand, I know some of those customers stopped buying it. They told me, they go, when we pick up your brand, we're dropping that one. It's going to replace it. On top of that, what they probably didn't expect is that I'd buy 14 players in that industry. A lot of those were their customers. And trust me, I'm not ego driven, but a little bit, if the math makes sense on this acquisition, the gravy is that I got to immediately remove that brand. Yeah, I'm the owner now. We're not bringing in that brand. We're replacing it with all of mine. And so that was part of it that stole their thunder and dropped them down a little bit from where they were. Again, that wasn't really drove me, but it felt a little bit good in those moments.
You look back on your life and you think about all these opportunities that you've had for you, which certainly wouldn't have come to you if your family had not made that fateful decision to get on the boat and brave going across the ocean and landing in the United States. What are your reflections on that, on the opportunities that have been, brought to you and what your life would be like with the family members that, now, and sadly you don't even know because they're growing up inside of Cuba? Yeah.
Well, for years, we would receive letters back and forth. Some of my letters didn't get there because I tried to sneak in like a $10 bill. They'd open all their mail, so we'd hear, but they couldn't tell us the reality. They would just tell us in subtle words what they're going through. Now it's different. We have Facebook Messenger and stuff. We could talk to cousins and aunts and uncles. So we hear a little bit more, but they're still guarded the way they speak because everything's filtered. But so one day, a wholesale client of mine from the Northeast came to visit me in my warehouse. And I sold the business, so I don't have it anymore, but I had a massive American flag hanging from the rafters in my warehouse. And they said, well, they're American, probably 10 generations American, probably. And they said, why do you have that big old flag here? And I go, what? And that made me realize, oh, you're not fortunate enough to know other. other than this. You think this is normal. I know how blessed I am to be in this country, and I know the opportunities that I have. They are phenomenal. It's what my family wouldn't give to have that. So I'll share with you something I prepared. And ever since I was a little kid, I have a constant reminder. First of all, my parents talk about Cuba and what we went through, and share things like sometimes we went to bed hungry so we could give you that glass of milk, things like that. And it's only gotten worse since then. But I haven't lost sight of that. And I think a quick shortcut to happiness is having gratitude, right? And I think about this every day. And I walk into my closet and I have a reminder, and it's the shirt that I had on the boat when I came from Cuba. And what this does for me is tells me, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I'm here. That's what my family went through. That's what I went through. I still have the trauma of the ocean and all of that. And I'm here for a reason. My 15 cousins that I don't know very well would die to have this opportunity. And what if one of them would become a superstar and be amazing for society? And here, what am I going to do? Sit around and watch TV, drink beer, and not work hard and not get ahead and not be a great father? No, I'm here. I'm the representative. I'm the chosen one. I'm going to make every single day count. And I understand not everybody has my story, but if you could find a way to pinpoint something physical that you can say, yeah, that's the thing. That's why I'm here on this earth. And that's your why. And that could guide you for the rest of your life. I think you will have an amazing life.
That's so great. And thank you for sharing that shirt with us. That's amazing that you have that still and that you can look at it each day. I'm so curious about Cuba as a country. I really hope that one day it'll open up and we'll all be able to go there and experience, all the riches, what it has to offer, and the world will be able to experience it as well. That's a great transition to my final question, which is my gratitude question. I'm a big fan of expressing gratitude. You already mentioned it, but I love to hear people's stories about peers, contemporaries, maybe others in the apparel industry. Now you're doing more coaching. So maybe other coaches, we're both members of entrepreneurs organizations. So maybe other peers in EO and your forum. Who would you want to shout out? Who would you want to thank for helping you in your journey?
Yeah. His name is Jeffrey L. Jordan from New Jersey. He's in the athletics world. He played college basketball, I think for City College in New Jersey years ago. That moment that I mentioned earlier, where I was at the lowest low, it really was the lowest point in my life, because I thought, that's it. I built all this. I was an entrepreneur. I did all of it. I worked hard. I saved every penny. It's all going to be gone because my vendor is going directly to my customers. He's the guy that forced me to go to his house. My wife went to a barbecue at his house with the kids, and I stayed home laying in bed, not even the TV on, just laying there, staring at the ceiling, thinking, it's over. It's over. That's it. Maybe not today, but it's over. I got to go back to get a job. I haven't worked for somebody in years, and since my 20s, and now I got to go work for somebody. Well, my wife came back and said, hey, Jeff wants to talk to you about what happened today with the whole thing. And I said, no, I can't talk to him. Tell him I'm not going. She went back to his house, and 10 minutes later came back, and she said, he insists he has something to tell you. Just come and talk to him. I could have said, no, I'm not going, and had been stubborn and an ego. And he goes, forget it, then I'm not going to tell him. I wouldn't be here today if I wouldn't have had that conversation. By the way, Jeff has received handwritten letters from me over the years and occasional texts. He knows how appreciative I am. So this is not weird for me to be thinking about him and thanking him, because I think about him all the time. Had he not told me, he's the guy who told me, those customers buy from you. They like you. You're the man doing all this. Go for it. Don't stop. Man, I wouldn't have built that company. I wouldn't have sold it. I wouldn't be doing my absolute passion that I do today. And to wrap that back up, by the way, you said Cesar Quintero at the beginning of this. Years ago, he told me, Joel, you just got to find your passion. And I thought he was crazy, because I've been able to do what I did, grow that business, make money, sell it. Now I'm doing my passion. So a couple of people that I mentioned there that I'm very grateful to, and there's many more.
Joel, I loved your story. Thank you for taking the time to share it with us. Where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you?
joelgandara.com. That's my coaching website. You can message me through there. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Joel, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.